Hola todos! Okay, I know it's been 2 weeks. I apologize. I was out of town, and I wanted to warn all of my listeners I will be out of town again in 2 weeks because I am going to Cuba. Very, very excited for a missions conference, and I will have a lot of news after that. So just expect a couple missed episodes 2 weeks from now as well. Today, we are talking about my favorite topic of all time, Carlos Manuel de Céspedes. If you don't know that name, you will know all about it by the end of this episode. He was officially assassinated February 27th, 1874. So because we just passed that, we're commemorating his death. And his history is very, very important and integral to the history of the independence of Cuba. So this man is actually my great, great, great uncle. So he's 4 generations up from my family. And I have all kinds of trees, and it took, I've always been kind of obsessed with it. So he is our, he's our ancestor. And essentially, he was born in 1819. In Bayamo, in the Oriente province, so on the eastern side of the island. And he was exposed to a lot of different ways of life when he went to the University of Spain to go be a lawyer and to go learn the law in order to be a lawyer. And he actually went to school in Spain. So when he went to school in Spain, he was exposed to a lot of different ways of life that he didn't realize how differently the Cubans were being treated compared to people in Spain, for example, or in Europe. He realized that the rights of the people in Cuba were not the same, that they were being taxed like crazy, that they had no sense of rulership or independence in their own country. And Spain essentially was in also a uprising position. So Céspedes got to see a lot of movements and realized when he came back that Cuba should be free, and he was going to dedicate his life to this. So he was a lawyer, had money. He purchased this land called La de Majagua. I've actually been over there. It's a historical museum site now in Cuba. And it is this huge farm, like so many acres. And it's actually attached to this port, which is really important because the Spanish port was connected right there. So Céspedes strategically had this property. He decides to get his friends together, people like some of the Mambises, Máximo Gómez, Antonio Maceo, Calixto Garcia, Figueredo. He was the guy who wrote La Bayamesa, which is really cool because that's actually the national anthem for Cuba currently. So Céspedes was actually very inspired by the United States, and his compatriots were called Mambises. If you're wondering why they were called Mambises, it's actually because they would attack with machetes on a horse. Okay? This is the type of guys that they were. And if you look here on the pesos, you'll see, for example, Máximo Gómez. You'll see Antonio Maceo, which is interesting. He was a slave and then he became a general, and he was leading the white men that were his owners. Crazy. José Martí, he was a writer in the revolution after. Camilo Cienfuegos, Calixto Garcia, and I'm not going to say this guy's name. Everybody knows him. And then on the 100 peso, we have Carlos Manuel de Céspedes. And they got together, and essentially Céspedes burns his farm. He burns all of it, which, if you remember with the port, it's really important because then he cuts off the port system for the Spaniards. And then him and his friends do a grito de Yara. So this is actually the text from that day in the grito de Yara, which means the cry of Yara. It is called the Manifiesto de la Junta Revolucionaria de la Isla de Cuba. Now, I'm not going to read this in Spanish because this podcast is in English. I'm just going to read this one paragraph. We consecrate these 2 venerable principles. We believe that all men are equal. We love tolerance, order, and justice in all matters. We respect the lives and property of all peaceful citizens, even if they are the Spaniards themselves, residents of this territory. We admire the universal suffrage that ensures the sovereignty of the people. We want the gradual emancipation and compensation of slavery, free trade with friendly nations that use reciprocity, national representation to enact laws and taxes, and in general, we demand the religious observance of the imprescriptible rights of man, constituting us as an independent nation, because it fulfills the greatness of our future destinies, and because we are sure that under the scepter of Spain we will never enjoy the frank exercise of our rights. So his farm is burning. He tells all his slaves on the farm, he's like, hey, come join our movement, you'll be free. And there is officially established a republic at that point where they are declaring themselves independent from Spain. The first act of this Congress, which is a House, a Senate, they have the executive. President Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, he is the one that is voted to be the first president of the republic. And the first act they take is to abolish slavery. December 27th, 1868, they abolish slavery. And they are starting the fight against the Spaniards. This is a long 10 years war. And it's interesting the way that the war goes. It's not the most successful. It's not the easiest to speak about in the sense of heroism, because there wasn't a lot of winning at that point. By the end of the 10 Years' War, Cuba still had not become officially independent. That was not until later on in 1901, after the Spanish-American War. But the attributes of this war were very important for setting up the foundations of national independence for Cuba. So you have these fighters, the Mambises, the people that are moving forward, this will for freedom. They're saying so many inspiring things. I mean, I have so many diarios on Céspedes and on the Mambises. This, for example, is a great book. It has a lot of his text. There's also a really good book here by a Cuban American in Miami that really knows a lot about the history in Cuba. And then this is also a great resource too. Ada Ferrer, she's great. She knows a lot about the history of Latin America. So those are just some resources for you if you want to know more specifics. But there's so much power here in the sense of freedom and the will to fight. In fact, Céspedes is the first one that says patria o muerte. He says country or death. He talks about how the Cubans are ready to die for the sake of independence because they're dying as men. They're dying with their sense of freedom that is God-given right. And there were so many good things about this conflict. However, we also see a lot of inner turmoil. So between the Spaniards and the Cubans, I mean, there's a lot of turmoil there, of course, it's a war. But even inside of the Republic itself, we see a lot of divisions. In fact, Céspedes later on, very sadly actually, is dismissed by the Congress because the Congress essentially makes his role really difficult. One of the guys there, Salvador Cisneros Bentancur, he wanted his position. And there was, Céspedes said, almost a civil war just inside of this republic, this newly established republic, that before they had even won the independence war. So unity, he was constantly pushing unity, and there was constantly a struggle for unity. Now, this was a difficult war. In 1870, his son Oscar was actually captured by the Spanish troops. And the Spanish troops told Céspedes that if you surrender, we'll give you your son. And then Céspedes responds in a very famous way. He says, Oscar is not my only son. All Cubans are my sons. And that's actually why he's called El Padre de la Patria, which means father of the country. However, despite his honor and despite all of the wonderful things in which he contributed in leading the fight, eventually he was dismissed from the Congress, and he willingly obliged in order to follow the rule of law. There was a lot of jealousy, division, politics happening within the Congress, and essentially they did not unite, and they dismissed Céspedes, and then Thomas Estrada Palma was the one who took the position of president. Céspedes says something very interesting in retort to what Congress did after he voluntarily obliged and gave over to the will of the Congress. He said, I did what I had to do. I sacrificed myself on the altar of my homeland, in the temple of the law. Blood will not flow in Cuba because of me. I have a clear conscience, and I await the verdict of history. He later on went to Sierra Maestra and took refuge in San Lorenzo. and was actually assassinated by the Spaniard troops after they found him on February 27th, 1874. Now, if you go to Cuba, it's very interesting because Fidel Castro, very tactically, has said that the revolution of 1959, of Castro's revolution, and the revolution of Céspedes is the same revolution. It is the continuing true revolution. If you read Céspedes, you will not find one iota, one word, one inclination towards communism. He loved the United States. He actually loved the form of government, the republic, the democratic republic. He liked the institutions of checks and balance. He liked the law, and he actually obliged to the law. Fidel Castro never obliged to the law. In fact, he made himself the law. So it's quite shameful for my family. I remember a specific moment when we felt so much shame over what Fidel Castro had done because he moved the bones of Carlos Manuel de Céspedes next to his grave, what would be his future grave. What Fidel Castro was trying to do was he was trying to equate himself with El Padre de la Patria. Fidel Castro wanted to be the new Céspedes. But honestly, he never was. He never will be. He never could be Céspedes because his honor and his sense of valor, his sense of God-given rights does not exist because he doesn't even believe in God. It is a sad thing to see how much Castro wanted to be like Céspedes and how far he is from ever being like him and how far he was because now he's gone. You will see Céspedes and all the Mambises. You'll see them all over the parks. You'll see them. There's a park in every town. There's street names after them. The history is alive. The independence history is alive in Cuba. The people know that the revolution of Céspedes was not the revolution of Castro. And even to equate it to revolution of Céspedes, no, Céspedes never called it his revolution. He called it Cuba's revolution. He's the first one who said Patria Muerte. He's the one that talked about Cuba Libre. Viva Cuba. Because he cared about the people and the God-given rights. So I do think that Céspedes would be quite disappointed with the Cuba today. In fact, he says this. The Cuban Revolution, this is Céspedes' idea on the revolution at that time. The Cuban Revolution, now vigorous, is immortal. The republic will defeat the monarchy. Already at that point, he knew that Cuba would win. The people of Cuba, full of faith in their destiny of freedom and animated by unwavering perseverance on the path of heroism and sacrifice, will be worthy of being masters of their fate among the free peoples of America. Our unchanging slogan is and always will be independence or death. Cuba must not simply be free. It cannot become a slave again. And I'll leave it there and let you all think about what Cuba is today compared to what Céspedes thought Cuba should and might be.